This talks about my kind of journey through 3D printing, how it started, where it is now, and then a little bit about 3D printing in general. So began a while ago when I was back in college. So I do a lot of kind of wargaming and stuff. And I'd looked into them. I'd kind of thought maybe I could make terrain, models maybe, cool stuff from games like Master Chief's helmet, which is going to be one of my next prints. And I've wanted one for years, basically. But the tipping point was kind of when Simon linked me to this just before Christmas. So it was £137 when I took the screenshot. It was less when I bought it. And somehow me and Simon found a code to get it even cheaper. So I got it for £130 delivered. I did about an hour's research when it was linked to me. On top of what I'd done in the years past, decided to buy one. So I did, and that's the printer. It's the Amet A8. Probably means absolutely nothing. There's quite a lot of printers out there to purchase. This one just happens to be a kit form from China based on an open source model. So it's basically rebranded and sold by a company called Anet. Then Simon bought one about an hour later. And as you do, it spread a little bit. And there's always one, of course, to get a different printer. So I bought the printer, didn't think about filament. So in a bit of a hurry, not long before I was about to receive the printer, I went on the internet, found a company called Rigid Ink, which do handy free samples of about 10 meters, got them to send me a couple, and bought a couple of spools off eBay for £10 each. To prepare me for actually printing things with the printer when I received it, so it didn't just look like an overpriced paperweight. As I said, it came in kit form, so I had to build it myself. There was quite a lot of challenges for me in the process, because I've never really done this before. I don't really know a lot about the boards, what's on them, how they work. I've never made anything electronically before, but it mostly was plug and play. So there's some pictures of me building it through the stages. This one here is just a shell. I haven't put any wiring in yet, apart from this one. So the frame was quite an easy build for me, because that's just nuts and bolts. The actual putting of some of the electronics in, the screen, the stepper motors, again, nuts and bolts. Actually wiring it, well, everything was labelled and plugged quite nicely. Surprisingly, from a kit from China, there was 3 really nice videos put together in about 8 hours for me in total, stopping and starting over the course of a weekend. I think Simon did his in 4 or 5. 5. So I managed to get it turned on, which was good. And then I had to calibrate it. Now, to calibrate a printer, you require some incredibly sophisticated tools. So it's literally a case of moving the nozzle around, rubbing a piece of paper between the nozzle and the bed, and then using the screwdriver to adjust the bed until it's the same distance all the way around. That took about 5 minutes. And then I decided to do a print. So the first thing I printed was supplied on an SD card with the printer. It was a little grey tray, basically. So it didn't turn out perfectly. Obviously, first print was going to have some blemishes. So I literally pressed the go button, and it kind of started working. First time, which is kind of a warning sign that things aren't going to work in the future. So it did print. It printed this tray. It's completely solid plastic. It took about 3 hours. It's not a fast process, 3D printing. And one of the corners globbed up because there was a little bit of filament hanging out. So it made this little ball here, and then that threw off the corner. But other than that, it turned out quite well. I then printed some upgrades for the printer because, you know, why not print upgrades before you print anything useful? The first thing I printed, which was actually useful, was this. So that's what it looks like when it's printed. It's currently on the printer. That's it fitted. It's a new nozzle to replace this one, which is rubbish. It comes with the model. It doesn't cool the plastic when the plastic is coming towards the nozzle from the bed. So some of your model doesn't get cooled and is still melty, and then it puts melty plastic on melty plastic, and it just turns into a bird's nest. Nathan's experienced a few bird's nests in his setup. So there's a few unprintable upgrades, probably. I mean, they might be printable, but it's cheap to buy them. So I bought a plug. So the Amet comes with typical Chinese wiring. So I bought a soldering iron, fitted this, soldered all the cables together, and printed a little enclosure to attach this to. I've bought some new timing belts, because the ones that it comes with tend to stretch. I've bought a little MOSFET because the printer could catch fire if you make the hotbed too hot. And a calibration sensor for the Z-axis to do bed leveling, which I thought would be amazing and brilliant and save me tons of time. It didn't. Which leads me to Skynet. So in order to do bed leveling, I needed to flash the firmware. This is getting into stuff that I'm not particularly savvy with. So I haven't done many Arduino things at all, but I ended up having to flash the firmware to this stuff called Skynet, which came recommended on the internet. Actually getting the firmware on there was fine, but then configuring, calibrating, making sure it all worked was a bit of a nightmare. Here is a video of my printer auto-leveling when I'd finally got the sensor on. Now, I've already printed an extra, like a bracket to actually hold the sensor onto the printer. The new nozzle's on there, and it's all in place. Mind the mess, that's irrelevant, I guess. So it goes through and does this, and now it can adjust the bed level, so you get your first layer perfectly fine. Actually printing, in the future, I'm probably going to get some upgrades again, because at the moment I can only print in one plastic, because I only have one nozzle, and I don't have the ability to do anything with that unless I change the plastic halfway through, and that's a nightmare because the extruder that it comes with is a bit rubbish. So there's many options for this. There's this thing here, which is called a diamond nozzle, so I can put 3 in. And that one you can actually mix colours, so you could put an RGB in there and technically do RGB prints. It doesn't work as well in practice as it might sound theoretically. Or you can have multiple individual filaments going down in this style, like the new, this is fairly new actually by Prusa. It was quite a rocky ride from the beginning to the end, I guess, at points. But for the most part, I've had some pretty interesting prints. They are all upstairs next to the printer. If you want to see them, it's currently working. It's doing the baby Groot that everyone seemed to want earlier. It should be a small baby Groot, like a baby Groot, because the normal size one would have taken like 20 hours to print, including the head. So what next? I might build another 3D printer. This one is the D-Bot. I was looking at a Hypercube, but Charlton pointed me in this direction. I think this one might actually be a better idea. I don't know. That's the other thing. I could print all the parts here and buy the metal and the wiring and have a new 3D printer. Yeah, so that's my journey through and what I'm doing. Thanks for listening. Any questions? Any generally 3D printing related ones, I guess? Yeah.
How much did it cost after all the upgrades that were printable?
So, like the switch was a couple of quid. The belts were a couple of quid. I bought a fan, which was a couple of quid. I don't know exactly, but none of the upgrades are particularly expensive. So they kind of quite easily come over time if you just buy them every now and then. You don't really notice it. Yeah?
The new printer that you're planning,
Mm-hmm.
will it allow you to do that you can't do now?
I don't think it'll allow me to do anything particularly that I can't do now. It'll just be more rigid. It'll be, again, a bit of fun learning experience, building something new from scratch rather than building from a kit from China, sourcing the parts individually kind of thing, so I know how each part of the printer works rather than just having a printer. Ben?
Can you make the new printer any size you want?
Yeah, so it's kind of scalable. You just get larger bits of metal to put it together with. I guess you might need to make this frame stronger if you make it too big, and then edit the firmware settings, because it's all open source Arduino-y kind of thing. Before you flash it on to the actual Arduino, you change some settings to make the size of the bed and the proportions different. Yeah?
I've got a connector on my desk that I've played with, and it scans 3D objects. Can you try to print anything from the real world scanning wise?
I haven't scanned anything yet, but I've got a friend of mine who's been making little models because he wants to make scenery for Warhammer. He sent me down some files, I've printed them and sent them up to him, and he's in the process of cleaning them up and casting them in resin so he can make many. But I would like to try a 3D scanned something, so if you want to send me anything you've scanned, I think Flavio wanted to print his head. Yeah.
Did you start out with an idea of things you wanted to do with it, or was it just a play thing?
Yeah, so I want to print myself Master Chief's helmet, because I just thought it'd be cool. One that I can wear, just because I'm a massive nerd. I wanted to print possible scenery for games I play, tabletop games, because that's just useful. I've also found a use for it since I bought it, which is 15mm scale tanks for a game, and they actually print out quite well enough for me to warrant printing for myself at least. There's a couple of other things. I've got like a little list at home in a text file on my computer.
And is it expensive compared to buying these things?
I guess it's more expensive in time. The filament itself is between 10 and 30 quid a kilo, depending on where you buy it. Some of the things I've got upstairs, I think the largest one is about 180 grams, and I printed it with cheap filament, so it was about 2 quid. Electricity, not a lot. It's not much to heat, to keep hot. Motors don't cost much electricity to power. So it depends how much time you want to spend setting it up. With my printer, it's got a lot of... It's not plug and play. I don't buy one. It doesn't come assembled. I don't just plug it in. I don't just print things. You can buy, say, an Ultimaker 3 for like £3, put it on your desk, press a button, and it'll print something.
Well, you don't have £3 spare to...
Definitely not. I wish I did. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you very much.